The sound of boots on linoleum echoed through the empty mess hall at Fort Bragg. Four shadows moved through the double doors at 2100 hours, their tan berets catching the harsh, fluorescent light that buzzed overhead like dying insects. The August heat still lingered in North Carolina, making the air thick and heavy with the weight of unfinished business. Evelyn Thorne knelt on the floor, her small frame hunched over a stubborn stain that had baked into the tiles during dinner service. At 5'3", she was dwarfed by the industrial mop bucket beside her, its gray water sloshing gently as she worked. The oversized army jacket she wore hung loose on her shoulders, the unit patches so faded they were barely readable. It looked like something pulled from a donation bin, 3 sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up to reveal small hands that moved with methodical precision. She didn't look up when the Rangers entered. She had learned long ago that invisibility was a weapon. 3 years of practice had made her a ghost. Nathaniel Graves led the group. 200 pounds of muscle and swagger moved across the mess hall floor like he owned every inch of it. The Ranger sergeant's arms were covered in tactical tattoos, each one telling a story of deployments and operations that he made sure everyone knew about. His eyes locked onto the small woman scrubbing the floor, and his lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. He kicked the bucket, hard. Dirty water exploded across the white tiles, spreading like a storm cloud across the section Evelyn had just cleaned. The gray liquid rushed toward her knees, but she didn't flinch. She simply stopped scrubbing and waited, her brown eyes fixed on the floor, watching the water find its level. "Look what we have here, boys." Nate's voice boomed in the empty space, designed to humiliate, to establish dominance. Someone thinks they're a soldier just because they throw on stolen gear from the PX store. Garrett Bishop moved to block the only exit. At 6'2", with the bearing of someone who believed his corporal rank made him untouchable, he positioned himself like a chess piece, taking control of the board. His perfectly pressed uniform and regulation haircut spoke of someone who had memorized every manual, but had never learned the difference between authority and leadership. "Where'd you steal this jacket from?" Garrett's voice carried the sharp edge of accusation. "The lost and found bin? Or maybe you dug it out of a dumpster behind the barracks?" Ashton Drake and Colton Webb completed the circle, cutting off any escape route with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this before. Ashton, a specialist who wore his arrogance like a medal, cracked his knuckles with deliberate slowness. The sound echoed off the walls like small bones breaking. Colton was the youngest at 21, barely old enough to buy beer, trying desperately to match the aggression of his seniors, despite the uncertainty that flickered in his eyes like a candle flame in wind. Evelyn said nothing. She slowly stood up, wringing out her cleaning cloth with movements so controlled they could have been choreographed. Her eyes remained fixed on the floor, avoiding all contact in a way that suggested submission, perhaps fear. The movements were careful, measured, like someone afraid of triggering violence they couldn't control. But anyone who knew what to look for would have seen the truth. The way her weight distributed evenly across both feet, the slight angle of her shoulders that put her hands in perfect position to deflect or strike, the controlled breathing that kept her heart rate steady despite the threatening situation unfolding around her. The security cameras in each corner recorded everything, their red lights blinking steadily like electronic eyes that never closed. Colton snatched the mop from her hands. The wood was old and weathered, and it snapped easily across his knee with a sharp crack that made Private Owen Beckett flinch in the kitchen doorway. The pieces clattered to the floor, rolling to a stop near Evelyn's worn work boots. "I'm talking to you, fake soldier." Colton's voice cracked slightly on the last word, betraying his youth despite his attempted intimidation. "You deaf or just stupid?" The mess hall fell into thick, oppressive silence. The air conditioning hummed, the fluorescent lights buzzed. These sounds mixed together to create a white noise backdrop to the brewing confrontation, like the calm before artillery fire. None of the 4 Rangers noticed the slight tension in Evelyn's shoulders. They didn't see the way her weight shifted almost imperceptibly to the balls of her feet. They missed how her breathing remained perfectly controlled despite four larger men surrounding her with hostile intent. What they couldn't possibly know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that in the next 20 minutes, everything they thought they understood about rank, power, and respect would be shattered completely. Evelyn bent down to pick up the broken mop pieces, her movements slow and deliberate. The old jacket shifted on her shoulders, and for just a moment Garrett caught a glimpse of something at her collar. Metal against metal, a sound too quiet to identify in the ambient noise of the mess hall. She gathered the wood fragments with the patience of someone who had cleaned up worse messes, both literal and metaphorical. "You deaf or just stupid?" Nate stepped closer, using his size to loom over her like a thundercloud. "When a ranger talks to you, you respond with respect. You understand that, janitor?" The word janitor dripped with contempt, as if the job itself was something shameful, as if honest work was beneath dignity. Evelyn's fingers paused for just a fraction of a second on the broken wood before continuing their task. When she finally stood, she kept her eyes downcast, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just trying to do my job." "Your job?" Ashton laughed, the sound harsh and mocking, like gravel being crushed under boots. "Your job is to stay in your lane and not play dress-up in uniforms you didn't earn. That jacket has unit insignia on it. You know what stolen valor means in the UCMJ?" The harassment continued, each ranger taking turns to demonstrate their supposed superiority. Garrett pointed at the patches on Evelyn's jacket, his finger jabbing at the faded cloth like a weapon. "That's not even the right configuration for current regs. This is what, pre-2009? You couldn't even steal something current." Evelyn's response was quiet but precise, delivered with the kind of specificity that should have been a warning sign. "That configuration was standard from 2005 to 2009 for units deployed to Kandahar province." The answer made Garrett pause, but only for a moment before his arrogance reasserted itself like a bad habit he couldn't break. "Oh, so you've been reading Wikipedia? Doing research for your little costume?" He reached out and grabbed her collar, intending to examine the jacket more closely. The sudden contact made Evelyn's body tense, though she didn't pull away. Hidden beneath the grabbed fabric, metal clicked against metal, a sound too quiet for the rangers to notice over their own laughter. But it was there, a challenge coin shifting in an inside pocket, a ghost from another life. The kitchen doors swung open and Private Owen Beckett pushed through, a dish towel still in his hands from KP duty. The young private took in the scene with eyes that had seen too much too soon. 4 rangers surrounding a small woman. His sense of justice flared like a match struck in darkness. "Hey, is everything okay out here?" Nate turned his glare on the private, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Mind your business, Private. This doesn't concern you." "With respect, Sergeant," Owen began, but Colton cut him off with the casual cruelty of someone who had been on the receiving end too many times and was eager to pass it along. "No one asked for your opinion, dishwasher. Get back in the kitchen where you belong." Owen hesitated, torn between his desire to help and the reality of challenging 4 NCOs who outranked him. Evelyn caught his eye and gave the slightest shake of her head, a gesture so small the rangers missed it entirely, but Owen understood. He reluctantly retreated to the kitchen doorway, but remained watching, his phone partially raised as if ready to document what was happening. Nate kicked the water bucket again, sending another wave across the floor with a splash that sounded like contempt made liquid. "You know what I think? I think you're one of those wannabes who hangs around base, probably dating some private wearing his clothes to feel important. Is that it? Your boyfriend deploy and leave you his jacket to remember him by?" The casual cruelty of the assumption would have stung if Evelyn hadn't heard worse. She had been called many things in her career, faced discrimination and doubt from people who thought her size and gender disqualified her from service. Ashton decided to escalate. He grabbed Evelyn's arm, his grip tight enough to leave marks, and tried to force her against the wall. The movement was aggressive, intended to establish physical dominance, to remind her of her place in the natural order as he understood it. But something unexpected happened. Evelyn's body moved with his force, not resisting but redirecting. Her free hand came up in what looked like a defensive gesture, but was actually positioning. Her feet shifted into a stance that anyone trained in close-quarters combat would recognize immediately. For just a moment, Ashton felt his balance shift, his own momentum being used against him like a lever finding its fulcrum. Before he could process what was happening, Evelyn had pivoted, broken his grip, and stepped back, all in one fluid motion that took less than 2 seconds. It looked almost accidental, as if she had simply stumbled in the right direction. "Did you just?" Ashton stared at his empty hand, then at Evelyn, confusion replacing aggression on his face like clouds moving across the sun. "I'm sorry." Evelyn raised her hands in a placating gesture, her voice quick and apologetic. "I just got startled, I didn't mean to." But Ashton's ego wouldn't let him acknowledge that he had been outmaneuvered by someone half his size. The cognitive dissonance was too great. "You think you're clever? Think you know some self-defense moves from a YouTube video?" The kitchen door opened wider, and Master Sergeant Frank Calloway stepped into the mess hall. The mess hall supervisor was a 20-year veteran with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen things he never talked about. His reputation for running the tightest food service operation on base was legendary. Those eyes took in the scene with the practiced assessment of someone who had dealt with every possible situation the military could throw at him. Water on the floor, broken mop, 4 Rangers surrounding one small woman in aggressive postures. "Is there a problem here?" His voice carried the authority of someone who had earned every stripe on his sleeve the hard way. "No problem, Master Sergeant," Nate replied smoothly, his voice shifting to the tone of respect required when addressing a senior NCO. "Just having a conversation about proper military protocols." Calloway's eyes moved to Evelyn, taking in her defensive posture and the aggressive positioning of the Rangers. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. "Thorne, you all right?" The use of her last name made the Rangers pause. It suggested a level of familiarity, a recognition that elevated her slightly from anonymous janitor to someone with a name, an identity within the base structure. "Yes, Master Sergeant," Evelyn replied quietly, her voice still carrying that submissive quality that had protected her for 3 years. "This woman is wearing military insignia without authorization," Garrett stated formally, as if making an official report to a superior officer. "We were addressing the situation." Calloway looked at Evelyn's jacket, then back at the Rangers. His expression remained neutral, giving nothing away, but his eyes told a different story to anyone who knew how to read them. "I see. And this addressing required 4 of you?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity of 4 trained soldiers confronting one small woman about a piece of clothing. The implication was clear. This wasn't about stolen valor. This was about something else, something smaller and meaner. Colton shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how the situation might look to an outside observer, to a court-martial board, to his mother. The mess hall door opened again, and Captain Rebecca Aldridge entered. The intelligence officer often worked irregular hours, her eyes shadowed from too many classified briefings and not enough sleep. She took in the scene with the practiced eye of someone trained to assess situations quickly and accurately. The body language told the story. 4 aggressors, 1 defender, several witnesses maintaining safe distances. Her gaze lingered on Evelyn, and like Calloway before her, something nagged at her memory, something she couldn't quite place. "Evening, everyone," Aldridge said pleasantly, though her eyes remained sharp as surgical steel. "Rather late for a gathering in the mess hall, isn't it?" "Ma'am," the Rangers said in unison, acknowledging the officer's presence with the automatic respect drilled into them from basic training. "We were just addressing a case of stolen valor, Captain," Nate explained, his tone shifting again to the formal respect required when addressing an officer. "I see." Aldridge pulled out her phone with casual movements that belied the speed with which her fingers moved across the screen. "And what evidence do you have of this stolen valor?" "She's wearing military insignia without authorization," Garrett stated, gesturing at Evelyn's jacket like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "Has anyone verified she doesn't have authorization?" Aldridge asked, her phone screen reflecting off her glasses as she typed something with practiced efficiency. "She won't provide any identification or service information," Ashton added, as if this proved guilt beyond reasonable doubt. Aldridge looked at Evelyn, studying her with an intensity that made the Rangers shift uncomfortably. There was something in the captain's expression, a calculation happening behind those sharp eyes. "What's your name?" "Evelyn Thorne, ma'am." Aldridge typed the name into her phone, accessing a database the Rangers couldn't see. Her expression remained neutral as results populated her screen, but her eyes widened slightly at something she read. She typed again, accessing a deeper level of records that required her intelligence clearance. The screen showed something that made her pause, made her recalculate everything. "Access denied. Classification level insufficient." Aldridge had been in military intelligence for 12 years. She had top-secret clearance with SCI access. She had read briefings on operations that would never see the light of day. And she had never, not once, hit a classification wall she couldn't penetrate. Until now, the tension in the mess hall had reached a critical point. Nate, sensing that the situation was slipping away from his control, like water through fingers, decided on one final push. "Look, if she's legitimate, it should be easy to prove. One phone call to personnel, one check of the database, and we'd know. But she won't do it because she can't. She's a fraud." Evelyn set down her cleaning supplies with deliberate care. When she spoke, her voice had changed subtly. The meekness was gone, replaced by something harder, more focused. Something that had been there all along, just waiting beneath the surface. "Sergeant Graves, you're making assumptions based on incomplete information. That's a dangerous habit in your line of work." The use of his name and rank stopped Nate cold. He hadn't introduced himself, hadn't mentioned his name at all. The name tape on his uniform was regulation size, impossible to read clearly from her distance in the poor lighting of the mess hall at night. "How did you—" "Your name tape," Evelyn said simply, though they all knew that was a lie. A polite fiction to maintain the illusion. "Nathaniel Graves, Garrett Bishop, Ashton Drake, Colton Webb, all from 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment." She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried the cold precision of an intelligence briefing. "Bishop is coming up on his 3rd deployment rotation, probably to Syria, based on the sun damage patterns on his neck and hands. Drake just got back from a training exercise at Fort Polk. Still has the chigger bites on his ankles. Webb is fresh out of Ranger School, less than 6 months based on how he still stands at parade rest when he's nervous." The specificity of the information, delivered in a calm, analytical tone, created a shift in the atmosphere like a weather front moving through. This wasn't observation. This was intelligence gathering. The kind of rapid assessment and processing that came from specialized training that these Rangers would never receive. Captain Aldridge's phone buzzed with incoming information. What she read made her take an involuntary step back, her professional composure cracking for just a moment. The classification level on the file she had accessed was beyond her authorization to fully read, showing only partial information with large sections redacted in black bars that hid more than they revealed. But what she could see was enough. "Gentlemen," Aldridge said carefully, her voice carrying a weight it hadn't held before. "I think there might be a misunderstanding here." "What kind of misunderstanding, ma'am?" Nate demanded, his aggression now tinged with uncertainty, like a man who had just realized he was standing on thinner ice than he thought. Aldridge looked at Evelyn, who gave the slightest shake of her head. A silent communication passed between them, woman to woman, soldier to soldier. Aldridge understood. Evelyn didn't want her identity revealed. Not yet. Not like this. Not by someone else. "Perhaps we should all just," Aldridge began, but she was interrupted by the arrival of Major William Strand. The base training officer pushed through the doors with the confident stride of someone who had earned his rank through competence rather than politics. He had been walking past the mess hall when he noticed the unusual gathering through the windows. His eyes swept the scene, taking in the tactical positioning, the defensive postures, the water on the floor. "Captain Aldridge, Rangers," Strand acknowledged with a nod. His eyes swept the scene one more time, cataloging details with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years training soldiers to notice everything. "Late-night cleaning detail?" "Sir," Nate began, but Strand held up a hand, cutting him off with the casual authority of a field-grade officer who had heard every excuse in the book. "I was asking Thorne." The Rangers exchanged glances. Another person who knew her name, another crack in the foundation of their assumptions. "Yes, sir," Evelyn replied, her voice carrying just the right amount of deference expected when addressing a major. "Just trying to finish up so I can secure the facility." Strand studied her for a long moment. Unlike the Rangers, he had the experience to recognize what they had missed. The way she held herself wasn't just military training, it was elite military training, the kind that took years to develop and more years to master. He had seen it before, in operators whose names were never spoken outside secure facilities. "Rangers, I think it's time you return to your barracks," Strand said, his tone making it clear this was an order, not a suggestion. "It's late, and I'm sure you have PT in the morning." "But sir," Garrett protested, unwilling to let go of his righteous indignation so easily. "She's wearing—" "I'm aware of what she's wearing, Corporal." Strand cut him off with the kind of voice that ended arguments before they began. "I'm also aware that you're harassing a civilian employee who has authorization to be here while you technically don't. The mess hall closes to general personnel at 2,000 hours, so unless you're on KP duty or have specific authorization to be here, you're the ones out of bounds." The reversal caught the Rangers off guard like a punch they never saw coming. They had been so focused on Evelyn's perceived transgression that they hadn't considered their own violation of base protocols. The hunters had become the hunted. Colton, in a moment of poor judgment, brought on by youth and frustration, and the desperate need to prove he hadn't made a terrible mistake, decided to make one last attempt to assert dominance. He reached out quickly, his hand moving toward Evelyn's collar, intending to grab the jacket and tear it away, to prove whatever point he thought needed proving, to salvage something from this disaster. Evelyn's reaction was instant and decisive. Her hand came up, deflecting Colton's grab with a movement so fast it blurred. Her other hand caught his wrist in a grip like steel. A simple redirect of force, combined with a pressure point technique, sent the young Ranger to one knee with a surprised gasp that echoed off the walls. The entire sequence took less than a second and looked almost gentle to observers, but Colton felt like his wrist was caught in a hydraulic press. "Please don't touch me," Evelyn said calmly, releasing his wrist immediately. Colton scrambled back to his feet, his face red with embarrassment and anger, his wrist throbbing with pain he couldn't quite process. "She assaulted me," he said to Major Strand, his voice cracking with indignation. "You all saw it. I saw you attempt to grab her and her defend herself," Strand said evenly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who would testify exactly that under oath. "Would you like to file a formal complaint? Because that would require a full investigation, including why 4 Rangers were in the mess hall after hours surrounding and harassing a female civilian employee." The threat of official scrutiny deflated Colton's anger, like air from a punctured tire. An investigation would not go well for them, and they all knew it. The power dynamic had shifted completely, though they still didn't understand why or how. From the kitchen doorway, Owen Beckett watched with a mixture of amazement and confusion. He had been recording the last few minutes on his phone, sensing that something significant was happening, even if he didn't fully understand what. The footage would be on the platoon group chat within an hour. By morning, everyone on base would know that something had happened in the mess hall. Something that changed everything. The mess hall door opened one final time, and a hush fell over the room like a curtain dropping. General Harrison Pierce entered, his silver eagles catching the fluorescent light. At 58, he carried himself with the bearing of someone who had commanded men in combat and made decisions that altered the course of history. Everyone snapped to attention with the automatic response drilled into them from basic training. Even Evelyn straightened slightly, old habits dying hard despite 3 years of pretending to be invisible. Pierce's eyes swept the scene with the cold efficiency of a man who had spent decades reading situations and making tactical decisions. The water on the floor, the broken mop, 4 Rangers in aggressive postures, one small woman standing alone. Master Sergeant Calloway, Captain Aldridge, and Major Strand all positioned between the groups like referees in a fight that had gotten out of hand. "At ease," Pierce said, though his tone suggested anything but ease was expected. The Rangers relaxed marginally, but tension still hung in the air like smoke from distant artillery. "Sergeant Graves, what's that in your hand?" Nate looked down at his hand as if surprised to find it holding something. The challenge coin. In all the chaos and confrontation, he had picked it up from where it had fallen when Evelyn moved to defend against Colton's grab. The black metal caught the light, the silver ghost symbol gleaming like a secret demanding to be told. "A challenge coin, sir. Found it on the floor. Miss Thorne claims it's hers." Pierce held out his hand, and Nate had no choice but to hand over the coin. The general examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands with movements that became slower and more deliberate with each passing second. Then his face changed. The color drained from his skin like water from a broken glass. His hands, steady hands that had signed deployment orders and court-martial documents and letters to Gold Star families, began to tremble. He took an involuntary step backward, his professional composure shattering like glass under pressure. "Where did you get this?" Pierce asked Evelyn directly, his voice shaking in a way that made every person in the room understand that something fundamental had just shifted. The general wasn't angry, he was afraid. Evelyn met his eyes for the first time, really met them. And when she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear, carrying across the mess hall like a rifle shot in the distance. "Commander Michael Bradford, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, August 15th, 2017. The date hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield that couldn't be forgotten. Pierce's hand went to his chest, fingers pressing against his uniform, as if checking that his heart was still beating. His face had gone from pale to ashen, the color of old concrete. He pulled out his phone with hands that still trembled, dialing a number from memory rather than contacts. When he spoke, his voice carried the formal precision of someone making an official call that would be recorded and archived. "This is Pierce, authentication code Tango 99 Alpha. I need immediate verification on a ghost unit operator." A pause. Everyone in the mess hall held their breath. "Designation 704. Yes, I'll wait." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Pierce listened for what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than 30 seconds. His expression grew more grave with each passing moment, his jaw tightening, his shoulders straightening, as if preparing to carry a weight he had hoped never to bear. "Understood, sir. Yes, sir. I'll handle it personally." He ended the call and looked at Evelyn with an expression that combined respect, weariness, and something that might have been pity, or perhaps it was fear. Fear of what she represented, fear of why she was here, fear of what came next. When he spoke again, it was with the formal precision of someone delivering a citation for valor. "Master Chief Evelyn Nicole Thorne, Ghost Unit 7, Operator 704, sole survivor of Operation Blackwater." The title hit the Rangers like physical blows. Master Chief was a Navy rank, E9, the second highest enlisted rank possible. For a janitor to be addressed as such by a general was unprecedented, impossible, and yet here it was, happening in real time. Pierce continued, each word measured and heavy. Navy Cross with classified citation, Silver Star with V device, 3 Bronze Stars with Valor, Purple Heart with 2 clusters. Each medal he listed was another hammer blow. These weren't participation trophies. These were decorations that spoke of combat, of valor under fire, of sacrifice that most soldiers could only imagine. Nate's face had gone pale. Garrett looked like he might be sick. Ashton had taken several steps back, as if distance could undo what had been done. Colton, the youngest, looked like he had just realized he had kicked a sleeping tiger. "Sir," Nate stammered, his earlier swagger completely evaporated. "That's not possible. She's just a—" His voice trailed off as he realized there was no way to finish that sentence that wouldn't make everything worse. "She's just what, Sergeant?" Pierce's voice was cold as winter steel. "A janitor? A woman? Someone you thought you could intimidate because she didn't fight back?" The general's words cut through the mess hall like a blade, laying bare the ugly truth of what had happened here tonight. Pierce turned back to Evelyn, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a different weight. Not formal citation, but personal acknowledgement. "Show them." Evelyn hesitated for just a moment. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of maintaining the fiction that she was nobody, nothing, just a janitor trying to get through the day. All of it about to end. She slowly removed her janitor's shirt, revealing a black tank top underneath. The Rangers looked away reflexively, but Pierce's voice stopped them. "No, you started this. You'll see it through." Evelyn turned her shoulder toward them and pulled the tank top strap aside. The tattoo was a work of art and horror combined. A skull wearing a special operations helmet, surrounded by 7 stars. 6 of them filled in with solid black ink. 1 still outlined, empty, waiting. Below it, coordinates were etched in precise numbers. 34.5553 degrees north, 69.2075 degrees east. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. The date, August 15th, 2017. And wrapped around it all, 6 names in small, precise script. Bradford, Santos, Brennan, Donovan, Sullivan, Harding. Below them, in Latin, a motto that carried the weight of grief and purpose. Mortui vivos docent, the dead teach the living. "My team," Evelyn said quietly, her voice hollow with a grief that 3 years hadn't diminished. "My brothers, the reason I'm still here, and they're not." The weight of that survivor's guilt was palpable, filling the mess hall with a heaviness that made breathing difficult. Nate found his voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. How did you survive when they didn't?" Evelyn's hand went unconsciously to her abdomen, where beneath the tank top, scars told their own story. Stories of bullets and shrapnel, and decisions made in moments when there was no good choice, only necessary ones. "Because they made sure I did. 6 operators gave their lives to get 1 wounded teammate to extraction. They decided I was worth saving. I've been trying to prove them right ever since." The Rangers stood in stunned silence, the full weight of what they had done finally crashing down on them like an avalanche they never saw coming. General Pierce's expression hardened, military discipline reasserting itself over shock and revelation. "Sergeant Graves, you and your team will report to my office at 700 tomorrow. You'll face Article 15 proceedings for harassment of civilian personnel, conduct unbecoming, and violation of base protocols for being in the mess hall after authorized hours. I expect reduction in rank is likely for all of you." The Rangers accepted this without protest. They had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, and they knew it. "Additionally," Pierce continued, his voice carrying the weight of command, You'll each volunteer for 100 hours of community service. You'll work with Master Chief Thorne, if she's willing, to learn what real service looks like when it's not about glory or recognition. Evelyn gave a slight nod, her expression unreadable. Now get out of my sight, report to your commanding officer and inform him of what's transpired here. I'll be calling him within the hour. The four Rangers filed out, their earlier swagger completely deflated. As Colton passed Evelyn, he paused, and when he spoke, his voice carried genuine remorse that came from understanding rather than fear of punishment. Master Chief, I'm sorry, not just for tonight, but for your loss, your team. Evelyn met his eyes and saw genuine empathy there, something that had been missing in his earlier aggression. Thank you, Webb. Learn from this. Become better. After the Rangers left, only Pierce, Evelyn, Calloway, Aldridge, and Strand remained in the mess hall. The sun had long since set, and the fluorescent lights seemed harsher now, throwing shadows that hadn't been there before. Pierce studied Evelyn with an expression that had shifted from shock to something more calculating, something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Master Chief, we need to talk. Privately. But before Evelyn could respond, Pierce's expression changed again. His hand went to his chest, fingers pressing against his uniform in a gesture that looked almost unconscious. A tell, a sign of guilt, or fear, or both. You've been exposed now. Whoever you're hunting, they know you're here. The statement hung in the air, confirmation of what everyone in the room had already suspected. Evelyn Thorne wasn't here by accident. This wasn't about needing a job or wanting to disappear. This was about something else. Something that required becoming invisible. Something that required 3 years of patience and planning. Good, Evelyn said, her voice carrying a cold certainty that made even the general pause. Let them come. Pierce's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, Nate appeared in the doorway one last time. His face was set with determination that spoke of decisions made and consequences accepted. Master Chief, this isn't over. Something about all of this doesn't add up. I'm going to find out what's really going on. Evelyn turned to face him, and for just a moment the mask slipped. They saw the cost written in those brown eyes, not emptiness, but a weight that only comes from carrying ghosts. The look of someone who had walked through hell and brought pieces of it back. Be careful what you look for, Sergeant. You might not like what you find. The warning carried weight beyond the words themselves, a promise and a threat wrapped together. After Nate left, the remaining officers began to filter out as well. Aldridge gave Evelyn a long look before departing, her intelligence officer's mind already working through the implications of what she had learned tonight. Strand nodded once, a gesture of respect from one professional to another, before following her out. Calloway lingered, his eyes on Evelyn with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern? Guilt? Something else? Master Chief, if you need anything at all, you know where to find me. Thank you, Master Sergeant. After he left, only Pierce and Evelyn remained. The general held out the challenge coin, but when Evelyn reached for it, he didn't immediately let go. Why are you really here, Thorne? At Fort Bragg, this isn't about disappearing. No, sir, it's not. Who are you hunting? Evelyn met his eyes, and in that moment, she saw something that confirmed what she had suspected for months. Pierce knew more than he was saying. The question was whether he was part of the problem or part of the solution. With respect, sir, if I told you that, you'd either try to stop me or you'd become a target yourself. Either way, it wouldn't help. Pierce studied her for a long moment, then released the coin. Be careful, Master Chief. The kind of people who could sell out Ghost Unit 7, they have resources you can't imagine. They don't hesitate to eliminate threats. I'm counting on it, sir. After Pierce left, Evelyn stood alone in the mess hall. She looked at the challenge coin in her hand, Bradford's coin that he had pressed into her palm before pushing her onto that helicopter 3 years ago. its ghost insignia still catching light. Then she walked to the janitor's closet and opened the door. Hidden behind cleaning supplies and mop buckets was a corkboard covered in photographs, documents, and red string connecting them in a pattern that told a story of betrayal and conspiracy. 3 years of investigation, 3 years of gathering evidence, 3 years of getting closer to the truth, and now her cover was blown. She touched the tattoo on her shoulder, feeling the raised ink beneath her fingers. 6 names, 6 heroes, 6 reasons to keep fighting. "I'm close, Commander," she whispered to the empty room. "The mole is on this base. I can feel it." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She pulled it out and read the message, her expression not changing even as ice ran down her spine. "I know who you are. I know why you're here. Jim, midnight. Come alone or more soldiers die." Evelyn deleted the message and pocketed the phone. She returned the cleaning supplies to the closet, hiding the evidence board behind the mundane tools of her cover identity once more. Then she finished mopping the floor, working with the same methodical precision she had shown all evening. To anyone watching the security cameras, she was just a janitor doing her job. Nothing more, nothing less. But alone with her thoughts, Evelyn's mind was already working through tactical scenarios and threat assessments. Planning for midnight, planning for confrontation, planning for the moment when the hunter and the hunted would finally meet. 3 years of patience was about to pay off. The dead would finally get their justice. And Evelyn Thorne, the ghost who had died in Kandahar but kept walking anyway, would make sure that every person responsible for the deaths of her brothers would pay the price they owed. The mess hall lights clicked off one by one as she secured the facility for the night. Darkness fell like a curtain, but in that darkness, a ghost was hunting. And ghosts were most dangerous when you couldn't see them coming. The dawn came to Fort Bragg like it always did, indifferent to the revelations of the night before. Evelyn Thorne stood in her small apartment bathroom, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. The face looking back at her was 28 years old, but the eyes were older, much older. She hadn't slept. The nightmare saw to that. Bradford's face in those final moments. Santos laughing at a joke she couldn't remember. Brennan's hands flying over equipment that would never save him. Donovan pressing morphine into her hand before bleeding out. Sullivan's last shot before the bullet found him. Harding holding the door that became his tomb. She pushed the memories down and pulled on her janitor's uniform with the same precision she had once used to don tactical gear. Every movement efficient, every piece in its proper place. The old army jacket hung on the hook by the door, and she studied it for a long moment before putting it on. No more hiding. That ship had sailed the moment the challenge coin hit the floor. Her phone buzzed. A text from Calloway. Brass asking questions. Heads up. She deleted it immediately. Old habits from operational security protocols that had become second nature. Evelyn arrived at Fort Bragg at 05:30 hours, a full hour before her shift officially started. The base was already alive with morning physical training, formations of soldiers running in synchronized cadence, their chanted calls echoing across the grounds like a heartbeat that never stopped. She parked in the civilian employee lot and walked toward the mess hall, her stride measured and unremarkable. But something was different this morning. She felt it in the way people looked at her, or rather, the way they tried not to look. Word had spread. The 4 Rangers had talked despite their humiliation. Others had shared what they witnessed. Videos had been quietly circulated among the barracks. The janitor who had made 4 elite soldiers back down. The woman with the Navy Cross. The ghost who had walked out of Kandahar when no one else did. Inside the mess hall, the breakfast crew was already at work. Specialist Jennifer Martinez, who had never once acknowledged Evelyn's existence in 8 months, looked up from the grill and gave her a small nod. Private First Class Tommy Chen actually stepped aside to let her pass, a courtesy previously reserved for NCOs and officers. Evelyn began her morning routine, checking supplies, preparing cleaning stations, reviewing the schedule. Normal, mundane tasks that helped maintain whatever was left of her cover. But she could feel the weight of observation like crosshairs on her back. At 700 hours, the mess hall opened for breakfast. Soldiers filed in with the usual morning chaos of trays and conversations and the clatter of silverware. Evelyn stayed in the background, mopping areas that had already been cleaned, maintaining the fiction even though everyone now knew it was a fiction. Then they walked in, not the 4 Rangers from last night, but their entire squad. 12 soldiers, all wearing the distinctive tan berets that marked them as Rangers, all moving with the coordinated purpose of a unit that had decided to make a statement. Nathaniel Graves led them, his jaw set with determination that suggested he had spent the night nursing his wounded pride into something harder and more dangerous. They took over 2 tables in the center of the mess hall, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere like a weather front moving through. Conversations quieted. Other soldiers found reasons to sit elsewhere. Evelyn continued mopping, her back to them, but every sense alert to their movements. She heard chairs scraping, trays being set down with unnecessary force, the low murmur of voices discussing something with intensity. Garrett Bishop's voice carried, despite his attempt to keep it low. I ran her name through every database I could access. Evelyn Thorne barely exists before 2 years ago. It's like she appeared out of nowhere. People don't just appear, Ashton Drake replied. Everyone has a history. If hers is hidden, there's a reason. Colton Webb, still nursing his bruised wrist and ego from last night, added quietly, maybe she's actually hunting someone, using the janitor thing as cover. The speculation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Rebecca Aldridge. The intelligence officer entered the mess hall with purposeful strides, her eyes shadowed from a night spent searching databases and making phone calls to contacts who worked in buildings with no names. She wasn't here for breakfast. Her trajectory took her straight to Evelyn, who set down her mop and straightened, already knowing what was coming. Miss Thorne, Aldridge said formally, loud enough for others to hear. Could I speak with you privately? Of course, Captain. They stepped outside, away from the windows but still within sight of security cameras. Aldridge's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held questions that went beyond professional curiosity. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Aldridge began, her voice low. Last night when I searched your name in our databases, I hit classification walls I've never encountered before. Files that require clearance levels that technically don't exist in normal military structure. She paused, studying Evelyn's face. Who are you? Or maybe more accurately, who were you? Evelyn met her gaze steadily. I'm a janitor, Captain. I clean the mess hall, empty trash cans, mop floors. That's what you do, Aldridge pressed. I'm asking who you are. Sometimes, Evelyn said carefully, the best answer to a question is not asking it in the first place. Aldridge's eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? No, ma'am. It's a kindness. There are things in military service that are better left buried. Operations that never happened. Units that never existed. Soldiers who were never there. Ghost stories, Aldridge said quietly. Exactly. Stories. Nothing more. Before Aldridge could respond, her phone buzzed with an urgent notification. She glanced at it and her face went pale, the color draining from her skin like water from a broken vessel. I have to go, but this conversation isn't over. As Aldridge hurried away, Evelyn noticed movement in her peripheral vision. Major William Strand was standing by the entrance to the base command building, watching their interaction with the focused attention of someone trained to notice everything. When he caught Evelyn's eye, he gave a slight nod and disappeared inside. Evelyn returned to the mess hall, where the atmosphere had grown even more tense. The Rangers were standing now, formed in a loose semicircle near where she had been working. But something had changed. The aggression from last night was gone, replaced by something else. Nate stepped forward, And when he spoke, his voice carried across the suddenly quiet mess hall. Master Chief Thorne, we need to talk. About last night. About why you're really here. Evelyn set down her cleaning supplies, her posture shifting subtly. No longer the submissive janitor trying to avoid conflict. Something harder showing through the cracks in her cover. I'm a janitor, Sergeant. No. Nate pulled out a folder, opening it to reveal printed pages covered in notes and photographs. You're hunting someone, and your cover being blown last night puts you in danger. He laid the pages on the nearest table. Evelyn could see her own face in surveillance photos from different bases. Fort Carson, Fort Hood, Fort Benning, time-stamped over the last 2 years. I've been pulling records all night, Nate continued. Every base you've worked at has had a major security incident within 6 months of you leaving. Fort Carson, espionage ring exposed. Fort Hood, sleeper agent arrested. Fort Benning, classified documents recovered before they could be sold. He paused, his expression darkening. There's something else. My father was Colonel Richard Kane. He was logistics officer for JSOC during Operation Blackwater. His name appears in Bradford's evidence cache. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. 3 months after Kandahar, he put a gun in his mouth, left a note saying he couldn't live with what he'd helped them do. I've been trying to understand what that meant for 3 years. Your investigation finally gave me answers. He looked at her directly. You're not running from something. You're hunting it, and we just exposed you to whoever you're hunting. Evelyn evaluated him in silence, calculating risk versus reward, trust versus operational security. She had been alone for 3 years, carrying the weight of this investigation by herself because that was safer for everyone involved. But her cover was blown. The rules had changed. Then help me, she said finally. Watch my 6. Nate nodded slowly. What do you need? First, I need to know if I can trust you. Last night you were ready to destroy me over a jacket. Today you want to help. Why? Colton stepped forward, the youngest ranger, his face carrying shame that had kept him awake all night. Because we screwed up, Master Chief. We saw what we expected to see instead of what was really there. We judged you based on assumptions and prejudice. And when I couldn't sleep last night, I kept thinking about your team. 6 teammates who trusted you enough to make that sacrifice. If they believed in you that much, then we should too. Evelyn studied them for a long moment, then made a decision that went against every instinct honed by 3 years of solitary investigation. Follow me. She led them to the janitor's closet, checking first to make sure no one was watching. Inside, she moved aside cleaning supplies and mop buckets to reveal the corkboard hidden behind them. The rangers stared at 3 years of investigation laid bare. Photographs of officers and officials, financial records showing unusual transactions, movement logs tracking people across bases and time zones, red string connecting it all in a pattern that told a story of betrayal and conspiracy. Someone at Fort Bragg sold out Ghost Unit 7, Evelyn said quietly. Someone with high clearance. Someone who knew our mission parameters, our extraction routes, our contingency plans. Someone who gave all of that to the enemy and watched 6 men die to protect their secret. Her finger traced the red string to 3 photographs at the center of the web. I've narrowed it to 3 suspects. General Harrison Pierce, Captain Rebecca Aldridge, Major William Strand. The general? Garrett breathed. You're investigating a general officer? I'm investigating whoever sold out my brothers. Evelyn's voice was steel. I don't care about rank. I care about justice. Nate studied the board, his tactical mind processing the information with the efficiency of someone trained to assess complex situations quickly. You said suspects, plural. What makes you think it's one of these 3? Commander Bradford's last words weren't goodbye, Evelyn said, her hand unconsciously going to her shoulder, where the tattoo lay hidden beneath her uniform. He gave me coordinates. They led to an evidence cache he'd hidden before the mission. Files proving that Ghost Unit 7 had discovered something they weren't supposed to find. a CIA black site using enhanced interrogation techniques beyond legal authorization. She paused, the weight of that knowledge heavy in the small closet. Bradford was going to expose it. Someone made sure he never got the chance. But how did you narrow it to these three? Ashton asked, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. Process of elimination. The intelligence that was leaked to the enemy was compartmented. Only a handful of people had access to all of it. Pierce was in the chain of command. Aldridge was the intelligence liaison. Strand was coordinating training for the operation. Evelyn's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, saw the message, and her expression didn't change even as something cold settled in her chest. "What is it?" Nate asked. She turned the phone so they could see the screen. "The gym, midnight, come alone." "It's a trap," Garrett said immediately. "Or an intervention," Evelyn replied. "Either way, I'm going." "Not alone, you're not." Nate's tone left no room for argument. But before Evelyn could respond, Ashton's phone buzzed. Then Garrett's. Then Colton's. They pulled out their phones and stared at identical messages. "The gym, midnight, come alone." Evelyn's mind raced through the implications. Whoever sent the messages wanted multiple people there, wanted witnesses or wanted targets. But which? "Someone's forcing a confrontation," she said quietly, "gathering everyone in one place." "Then we set up Overwatch," Nate said, his ranger training taking over. "Position the squad around the gym. Cover all exits. If it's a trap, we spring it our way." Evelyn studied him, seeing not the arrogant sergeant from last night, but a professional operator making tactical decisions. Maybe trust wasn't as dangerous as she thought. "All right, but we do this smart. No cowboy heroics, no unnecessary risks. We go in prepared for anything." The Rangers nodded in unison, and Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. The weight of solitary investigation lifting slightly, shared across shoulders that could help carry it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation disguised as routine. Evelyn went through her normal duties, cleaning and maintaining the mess hall, while the Rangers conducted their scheduled training. But beneath the surface, plans were being made. At 1900 hours, Captain Aldridge found Evelyn again, her expression troubled. "I've been running searches all day," Aldridge said without preamble. "You're investigating treason, aren't you? Operation Blackwater wasn't just a mission that went wrong. Someone deliberately sabotaged it." "Captain, you should stop digging. It's dangerous." "I'm DIA, Master Chief. Investigating threats to national security is literally my job." Aldridge pulled out a tablet, turning it so Evelyn could see the screen. It showed the same 3 suspects Evelyn had identified, but with additional information she hadn't been able to access. "I have 3 suspects too," Aldridge said, "but I have a 4th you haven't considered." She swiped to reveal another photograph. Master Sergeant Frank Calloway. Evelyn felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Calloway, who had been kind to her from the beginning, who had protected her last night, who had served 20 years and earned every stripe through competence and dedication. "No," she said, but her voice lacked certainty. "He's been helping me." "Has he?" Aldridge's eyes were sharp. "Or has he been watching you, keeping tabs on your investigation, making sure you don't get too close to the truth?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun recently fired. "I pulled his service record," Aldridge continued. "Frank Calloway has been logistics coordinator for black operations across 3 decades. Iran-Contra document retrieval, Abu Ghraib witness relocation, Yemen rendition flights, Somalia arms interdiction. Always support, always background, always with access to classified intel on operations that officially never happened." Evelyn's mind raced through every interaction she'd had with Calloway over the last 8 months. Every conversation, every piece of advice, every moment where he'd seemed just a little too understanding, a little too helpful. "If Calloway's the mole," Evelyn said slowly, "then he knows I'm investigating. He's known from the beginning." which means he's been controlling your investigation from the inside, Aldridge finished, leading you toward the suspects he wants you to focus on, away from himself. Evelyn pulled out her phone and showed Aldridge the midnight message. I got this earlier, so did the 4 Rangers I met with. Aldridge's expression darkened. I got one too, so did Strand. She looked at Evelyn with sudden understanding. Someone's gathering everyone in one place. All the suspects, all the investigators, one location, one time. The gym at midnight, Evelyn said. Whoever sent these messages, they're forcing an end to this, one way or another. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Evelyn returned to her apartment to gear up, pulling equipment from hidden compartments that had remained untouched for 3 years. Tactical vest, sidearm, knife, communications equipment, body armor that fit beneath civilian clothes. She checked her pistol with the automatic efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. 6 rounds loaded, 1 in the chamber, safety on until needed. For each round, she whispered a name: Bradford, Santos, Brennan, Donovan, Sullivan, Harding. 6 bullets for 6 ghosts. At 2300 hours, Evelyn left her apartment and drove back to Fort Bragg. The base at night was a different world, familiar landmarks transformed into potential ambush sites. Shadows could hide threats or allies. The darkness was both cover and concealment. She parked 3 blocks from the gym and approached on foot, taking an indirect route that would reveal if she was being followed. The August night was hot and humid, the air thick enough to taste. The Rangers were already in position, invisible in the darkness, their tan berets replaced by black watch caps. Nate's voice came through her earpiece, a whisper of sound that confirmed they were ready. All positions set, Master Chief. We have eyes on all entrances. Copy, Evelyn replied. Hold position unless I call it. The gym was a massive complex that loomed against the night sky like a sleeping giant. During duty hours, it was busy with soldiers maintaining their physical fitness. At night, it was supposed to be deserted, but lights were on inside, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across the equipment. Evelyn checked her watch. 23:45 hours, 15 minutes early. She approached from the east, using the loading dock entrance she had memorized during her janitor rounds. The door was unlocked, as she expected. Inside, the air was cool and still. Her footsteps echoed on the polished floor, announcing her presence to anyone waiting. She moved carefully, checking corners, watching reflections in the mirrored walls. A voice came from the basketball court, and Evelyn's hand moved to the weapon concealed beneath her jacket. I wasn't sure you'd come. She turned to see a figure emerge from the shadows. Major William Strand stepped into the light, his hands visible and empty, his expression unreadable. Evelyn's weapon cleared leather, aimed center mass with the automatic precision of muscle memory. Give me one reason not to shoot. Strand stopped walking, his hands rising slowly. Because I'm not your enemy, Master Chief. I'm DIA. I've been investigating Operation Blackwater for 2 years. Prove it. Strand carefully reached into his jacket and pulled out a tablet, setting it on the floor and sliding it toward her with his foot. Defense Intelligence Agency credentials. Your investigation file. Everything you found over 3 years. We've been tracking parallel to you. Evelyn picked up the tablet without lowering her weapon. The screen showed DIA identification for William Strand, along with case files that contained information she had never shared with anyone. You've been watching me. We've been protecting you, Strand corrected. You weren't supposed to survive Kandahar. When you did, certain people got very nervous. We needed to see where you'd lead us. The gym lights suddenly flooded on, bright and harsh, making Evelyn squint. More figures emerged from the shadows. Captain Aldridge entered from the east entrance, her DIA credentials already visible in her hand. Master Sergeant Calloway came through the west entrance, his expression troubled but resigned. And General Harrison Pierce walked through the main entrance, flanked by 4 armed security personnel in civilian clothes. 5 people, 5 suspects, all standing in the center of the basketball court like players in a game whose rules nobody fully understood. Strand spoke first, his voice carrying across the empty space. I sent the messages to everyone because it's time for truth. One of us in this room sold out Ghost Unit 7. One of us gave the Taliban everything they needed to turn that mission into a massacre. He looked at each person in turn. So I'm forcing the issue. Someone talks or someone acts, but this ends tonight. General Pierce laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound was bitter and tired, the laugh of a man who had carried a weight too long. You want truth? Fine, I'll give you truth. He looked directly at Evelyn, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Not fear, not anger, resignation. I sold them out. I gave the Taliban the coordinates, the timing, the extraction window. I sent Ghost Unit 7 into that kill box knowing they wouldn't come back. Evelyn lunged forward, but Nate and Ashton materialized from the shadows, their hands grabbing her arms, holding her back as she screamed. The sound that came from her throat was rage and grief and 3 years of suppressed agony all compressed into one wordless cry that echoed off the gym walls like artillery. Why? She finally managed to form words. Why did you kill them? Pierce's face was carved from stone, but his voice carried the weight of decisions that had haunted him. Because Ghost Unit 7 found something they weren't supposed to find. Evidence of CIA black site operations using enhanced interrogation techniques that went far beyond legal authorization. Torture, Master Chief. They found evidence of systematic torture being conducted in our name. He paused, letting that sink in. Bradford was going to expose it. He was going to blow the whistle, trigger congressional investigations, shut down the entire counter-terror infrastructure we'd built over decades. 6 soldiers versus hundreds of operations. Thousands of American lives potentially at risk if our intelligence gathering capability was crippled. Pierce's voice hardened. I made the call. I contacted JSOC. They contacted people higher up the chain. The decision came back. Contain it, by any means necessary. So you killed them. Evelyn's voice was ice and fire. 6 heroes. 6 men who believed in honor and duty in serving their country. You killed them to cover up crimes. I killed them to prevent a war, Pierce shot back. That black site operation was the only thing keeping tabs on a terrorist cell planning attacks on American soil. If it got exposed, if it got shut down, hundreds of Americans would have died, maybe thousands. So yes, I made the call. I live with that decision every single day. Before Evelyn could respond, before anyone could move, Master Sergeant Frank Calloway pulled his sidearm. The weapon came up smooth and fast, trained on General Pierce's head. Can't let you talk anymore, General. Everyone froze. Aldridge's voice was sharp. Calloway, what are you doing? Calloway's expression was calm, almost serene, the look of a man who had made peace with dark choices long ago. Cleaning up, like I've been doing for 20 years. He looked at Evelyn, and she saw the truth written in his eyes before he even spoke the words. Pierce gave the order, but I'm the one who transmitted the coordinates to the Taliban. I'm the one who altered the extraction timing. I'm the one who made sure Ghost Unit 7 walked into that kill box. The words hit Evelyn like physical blows. Calloway, who had been kind to her, who had protected her from the Rangers, who had offered support and understanding. Calloway, who had killed her brothers. You. Her voice was barely a whisper. You've been protecting me. Why? Guilt. Calloway's smile was sad. Penance? You were never supposed to survive, Evelyn. When you did, when you walked out of that hell alive, I thought maybe I could balance the scales, keep you safe, make up for what I'd done. He shook his head slowly. But you couldn't leave it alone. You had to keep digging, Keep investigating, keep pushing toward the truth. And now here we are. His weapon never wavered from Pierce's head. I've been the fixer for 20 years. Every time an operation goes sideways, every time someone finds something they shouldn't, every time evidence needs to disappear, they call me. Bay of Pigs documentation, Iran-Contra cleanup, Abu Ghraib witness management. I make problems go away. Calloway's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was describing routine maintenance. Ghost Unit 7 was just another job. 6 operators who found something they shouldn't have. The order came down, make it go away, so I did. He looked at Evelyn with something that might have been regret. Until you survived, until you came back, until you spent 3 years hunting the truth. His weapon shifted slightly, covering the whole room now. Here's what happens next. Pierce dies here tonight. Suicide, overwhelmed by guilt over Kandahar. The investigation finds nothing concrete. Case stays closed. You all go back to your lives. He met Evelyn's eyes directly. Or you die here with him. Your choice. The gym fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the thunder of hearts beating too fast. Evelyn stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, appearing unarmed and helpless. But she was neither. She whispered, so quietly that only the microphone hidden in her collar could pick it up. Alpha 7 Tango. The old Ghost Unit 7 code, the signal Bradford had taught them years ago. Breach on my mark. The windows exploded inward with synchronized precision. Glass rained down like frozen tears as 12 Rangers breached from every angle, smoke grenades tumbling across the polished gymnasium floor before erupting in thick gray clouds that swallowed the basketball court whole. Calloway's weapon tracked toward the nearest breach point, but Evelyn was already moving. 3 years of being a janitor hadn't dulled her edge. If anything, the discipline of hiding that edge had sharpened it to something keener than before. She dove left as Calloway's first shot cracked through the air where her head had been a heartbeat earlier. The round punched into the wall behind her with a spray of concrete dust. Her hand came up with the pistol she'd concealed beneath her jacket, but she didn't fire. Too many friendlies, too much smoke, too much chaos. Calloway was already moving, using Pierce as a shield, his weapon pressed against the general's temple as he backed toward the east exit. But the Rangers had trained for hostage scenarios, and Nate Graves had been waiting for exactly this moment. The sergeant came through the smoke like a ghost himself, low and fast, his training taking over with the automatic efficiency of someone who had drilled these movements 10,000 times. His shoulder hit Calloway's gun arm just as the sergeant fired, sending the round high and wild. Pierce dropped flat, military instincts overriding shock, as Calloway and Nate crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and violence. Evelyn was there in 2 steps, her weapon trained on Calloway's center mass, but she couldn't take the shot. Nate and Calloway were too close, rolling across the floor, each fighting for control of the sergeant's weapon. Calloway got a knee into Nate's chest and shoved hard, creating separation. His weapon came up toward the young Ranger's face, finger tightening on the trigger. Evelyn kicked the gun from his hand with a precision strike that sent it skittering across the polished floor. Calloway's eyes met hers for a fraction of a second, and in that instant she saw something flicker across his face. Pride, maybe, or recognition that the student had finally surpassed the teacher. Then his hand shot to his ankle and came up with a backup piece, a small revolver that had been hidden there all along. But Evelyn had been trained by the best, and one of the best lessons was that a smart operator always had contingencies. Her hand caught his wrist before the revolver cleared his ankle holster. She twisted with the leverage Bradford had taught her, the same technique she drilled until her hands bled during Ghost Unit 7 training. Calloway's grip broke and the revolver dropped. They faced each other in the clearing smoke, both unarmed now, both operators who had learned violence in the same dark schools. "Don't make me do this," Evelyn said quietly. "Just surrender." Calloway's smile was sad and knowing. You know I can't do that, Evelyn. 20 years of secrets, 20 years of operations that can't see daylight. They'll bury me in a hole so deep I'll never see the sun again. Then you should have thought about that before you killed 6 good men. 6 good men who were going to destroy everything we'd built, Calloway shot back. You still don't understand. This isn't about right and wrong. It's about necessary and unnecessary. Bradford was going to expose operations that kept this country safe. I did what had to be done. You murdered my brothers. I saved American lives. The words hung in the air between them, two truths that could never be reconciled. Then Calloway moved. He was fast for 45, faster than he had any right to be, his hands coming up in a combat stance that Evelyn recognized because he had taught it to her. They had sparred before, back when she was learning, back when he was the experienced operator passing knowledge to the next generation. But that was before Kandahar, before she had walked through fire and come out the other side carrying the weight of 6 ghosts. His first strike was a textbook combination, jab, cross, hook, designed to overwhelm and control. Evelyn slipped the jab, deflected the cross, and stepped inside the hook. Her elbow came up into his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs with a whoosh. For Bradford, she whispered. Calloway staggered back but recovered, his training asserting itself. He came in low with a takedown attempt, trying to use his weight advantage. Evelyn sprawled, denying the takedown, and drove her knee into his ribs as he passed beneath her. For Santos, they separated and circled in the smoke-filled gym, the Rangers forming a loose perimeter around them, weapons trained but holding fire. This wasn't their fight. This was something older, something that went back to Kandahar and choices made in the dark. Calloway feinted left and came right with a spinning back fist that would have taken Evelyn's head off if it connected. She ducked under it and drove a palm strike into his kidney, the kind of blow that would leave him pissing blood for a week. For Brennan, Calloway's face was pale now, sweat streaming down his face, his breathing labored, but his eyes still held that cold calculation, that operator's mindset that could process pain and fear and turn them into tactical advantages. He grabbed for her arm on the next exchange, trying to pull her into a joint lock, but Evelyn had seen him teach that move 100 times. She knew every step, every angle, every pressure point. She reversed the grip, torquing his wrist until something popped. Not broken, but sprained badly enough that his right hand was now compromised. For Donovan, Calloway switched to southpaw, still dangerous, still fighting with the desperate efficiency of a man who knew this was his last stand. His left hook caught Evelyn on the temple, sending stars dancing across her vision. But she'd taken worse, had taken rounds through her shoulder and abdomen and kept fighting. A punch, even a good one, wasn't going to stop her now. She came back with a combination Bradford had drilled into her during their last training session before the mission. The one he'd called the Ghost Sequence, designed to overwhelm an opponent's defenses through sheer, relentless pressure. Jab to the nose, cross to the jaw, hook to the body, uppercut to the chin. Calloway's head snapped back with each impact, blood streaming from his nose, his legs going rubbery. For Sullivan, he tried to clinch, to buy time, but Evelyn drove a knee into his thigh, deadening the muscle with a Charlie horse that dropped him to one knee. She could have finished it there, could have put him down permanently with a dozen different techniques, but she wanted him to understand, wanted him to feel what her brothers had felt. She grabbed his collar and pulled him close, her voice a whisper that only he could hear. For Harding. Then she drove her forehead into his nose with a headbutt that sent him sprawling backward, unconscious before he hit the ground. The gym fell silent except for harsh breathing and the settling of disturbed air. Evelyn stood over Calloway's unconscious form, her hands shaking, adrenaline and 3 years of suppressed rage coursing through her veins like electricity. "The dead teach the living," she said to his unconscious form. "You taught me that. Consider the lesson learned." Nate stepped forward with zip ties, securing Calloway's hands behind his back with practiced efficiency. Other Rangers moved to secure Pierce, who sat against the wall with his hands already raised in surrender. Captain Aldridge approached Evelyn carefully, as one might approach someone standing on the edge of a cliff. "Master Chief, are you all right?" Evelyn looked down at her hands. They were bruised and bleeding from the fight, but steady now. The shaking had stopped. "I'm fine, Captain. That was quite a fight." "He taught me everything I know," Evelyn said quietly. "I just learned the lessons better than he expected." Major Strand was on his phone, speaking in the clipped tones of someone coordinating a major operation. When he finished, he turned to the assembled group. "DIA teams are rolling now. We're executing coordinated raids across 12 locations. Pierce wasn't lying about this going higher. We've identified 11 other individuals involved in the conspiracy: senators, defense contractors, intelligence officials, all being taken into custody as we speak." He looked at Evelyn with something approaching respect. "Your investigation broke this open, Master Chief. 3 years of patient work, and you found what we couldn't." "Bradford found it," Evelyn corrected. "I just followed where he pointed." The next 48 hours blurred together in a series of interrogations, debriefings, and formal statements. Calloway confessed to everything, his 20-year career as a fixer laid bare in excruciating detail. 47 black operations over 2 decades, each one burying secrets that powerful people wanted to stay buried. Pierce corroborated the network, naming names and providing documentation that he'd kept as insurance. The investigation spread like wildfire through the military and intelligence community, burning away corruption that had festered for 2 decades. Evelyn watched it all from a safe house, giving her statements to DIA investigators who treated her with a deference that felt strange after 3 years of being invisible. On the 3rd day, they let her go back to her apartment. She stood in the small bathroom, looking at her reflection again, trying to understand who she was now that the hunt was over. The woman in the mirror looked the same, but something fundamental had shifted. A month later, Evelyn stood in a classified wing of the Pentagon, a place that officially didn't exist on any map or blueprint. The room was small and simple, with walls of black granite that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. On the wall, 7 names were etched in silver letters that caught the light from hidden fixtures: Commander Michael Bradford, Sergeant Daniel Santos, Corporal Ethan Brennan, Specialist Lucas Donovan, Sergeant Ryan Sullivan, Corporal Benjamin Harding, Master Chief E.N. Thorne. "Why is my name there?" Evelyn asked quietly. Captain Aldridge, now promoted to major and standing beside her in dress blues, answered softly, "Because Evelyn Thorne died in Kandahar. What walked out was something else, a weapon Bradford forged in fire and grief and purpose." The inscription below the names read, "For those who served in silence, fought in shadows, and gave everything, the nation remembers." The ceremony was small, just a handful of people who had the clearance to know the truth: Aldridge, Strand, who had led the DIA investigation, Nate and the 3 other Rangers who had helped bring Calloway down, and the families: Mrs. Bradford, gray-haired and dignified, who touched her husband's name with trembling fingers; Santos's mother, who wept quietly; Brennan's sister, who stood ramrod straight in a Marine Corps uniform; Donovan's father, a retired Army colonel, who saluted the wall with precision that spoke of a lifetime of service; Sullivan's wife and 2 children, the youngest barely old enough to remember his father; Harding's brother, who placed a challenge coin at the base of the memorial. One by one, they placed items: photographs, dog tags, letters, small pieces of lives cut short by choices made in rooms like this, by people who believed the ends justified the means. Nate stepped forward and placed a challenge coin as well. Not a Ghost Unit 7 coin, but his father's coin, Colonel Richard Kane, who had helped facilitate the betrayal and then killed himself when the guilt became too heavy to bear. "For Colonel Richard Kane," Nate said formally, who made a terrible mistake and tried to make it right. May he find peace. Evelyn placed her coin at the base of the memorial. Beside it, she placed Bradford's coin, the one he had pressed into her hand before pushing her onto that helicopter 3 years ago. "I'm still learning, Commander," she whispered, "still trying to be worthy of what you gave me." The ceremony ended and people filtered out slowly, leaving Evelyn alone with the memorial. She stood there for a long time, her hand resting on the cold granite, feeling the names beneath her fingers. "I got them," she said to the wall, to the ghosts, to the brothers she would carry for the rest of her life. Pierce is in Leavenworth, Callaway too. 11 others arrested. The network is broken. The black site operations are being reviewed. Congressional oversight is being implemented. She paused, gathering herself. "I know it doesn't bring you back. I know it doesn't change what happened. But you didn't die for nothing. Your sacrifice meant something. It exposed corruption. It brought justice. It made the system better." Silence answered her, but it felt different now. Not empty, but peaceful. "I'm going to train others, pass on what you taught me, Bradford's lessons, Santos's humor, Brennan's technical expertise, Donovan's compassion, Sullivan's patience, Harding's courage, all of it. It lives on through me, and I'll make sure it lives on through others." She straightened, came to attention, and rendered a salute so precise it could have been used to teach proper form at West Point. "Semper Fi, Ghost Unit 7, until Valhalla." 6 months later, Fort Bragg hummed with the familiar rhythms of military life. A new training facility stood where old storage buildings had been, its sign reading Ghost Legacy Program in simple black letters. Inside, Evelyn stood before a class of 20 candidates. They were a mix of special operations veterans looking to continue serving and young operators hungry to prove themselves. Among them, Nate, Garrett, Ashton, and Colton sat in the front row, their tan berets replaced by black baseball caps bearing the Ghost Unit insignia. Evelyn wore BDUs now, no longer hiding behind a janitor's uniform. Her instructor credentials were displayed on her chest, along with a name tape that read simply, Thorn. "Ghost Unit 7 died so you could stand here," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned every word through blood and sacrifice. "They died believing that sacrifice meant something, that honor and duty and service weren't just words, but principles worth dying for." She paused, letting that sink in. "This program honors that belief. We operate in shadows. We serve in silence. We get no recognition, no medals, no public acknowledgement. Just mission completion and the knowledge that we're doing what's necessary to keep this nation safe." Her eyes swept across the candidates, hard and uncompromising. "If that's not enough for you, if you need glory or recognition or public praise, leave now. The door is open. No judgment, no repercussions. But if you stay, you commit to something bigger than yourself." No one moved. "Good. Let's begin." The training was brutal. Evelyn pushed them harder than any of them had been pushed before. Drilling techniques that Bradford had taught her, scenarios that Santos had designed, technical skills that Brennan had mastered. She was building operators in the image of Ghost Unit 7, ensuring that what died with her brothers survived through a new generation. Nate proved to be a natural leader, his tactical mind processing complex scenarios with efficiency that would have made his father proud. But now that tactical ability was tempered with humility, with understanding that leadership meant service, not dominance. During a break, he approached Evelyn with a question that had been bothering him. "Master Chief, that night in the mess hall, when we were harassing you, you could have stopped us at any point. Why didn't you?" Evelyn considered the question, then answered honestly. "Because I needed to understand who you really were. Not what you appeared to be, but who you were when you thought no one was watching. When you thought you had power over someone weaker." She met his eyes directly. "You failed that test, Sergeant. You saw someone you perceived as vulnerable and chose cruelty. That's not the kind of operator I want to train. Nate flinched at the words, but didn't look away. But then you made a choice to be better, to investigate instead of dismiss, to help instead of harm, to admit your mistake and work to fix it. That's the kind of operator I need. She paused. Everyone fails sometimes. What matters is what you do after the failure, whether you justify it or learn from it and become better. My father failed, Nate said quietly. He helped them kill your team. Then he couldn't live with it. Your father made a terrible choice under pressure from people more powerful than him. Then he tried to make it right the only way he knew how. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it doesn't define you either. Evelyn put a hand on his shoulder. You're not your father's mistakes, Graves. You're your own choices. Choose wisely. The training continued for weeks, turning the candidates into something sharper, harder, more capable. They learned to fight like Evelyn fought, to think like Bradford thought, to operate like Ghost Unit 7 had operated. But they also learned the lessons that had cost 6 men their lives. The importance of questioning orders that didn't make sense. The value of speaking up when something felt wrong. The courage to choose right over expedient, even when it cost everything. One evening, after a particularly brutal training session, Evelyn returned to her quarters and found a package waiting. No return address, just her name in precise handwriting. Inside was a video drive and a handwritten note. For Thorn only, open if I'm KIA, password, your BUD/S class number. Bradford's handwriting. Evelyn's hands shook as she connected the drive to her laptop and entered the password. 217, her BUD/S class number from what felt like a lifetime ago. The screen flickered to life, and Bradford's face appeared. He was in full tactical gear, sitting in what looked like a tent at Firebase Phoenix. The timestamp showed August 14th, 2017, the day before the mission, the day before everything went wrong. Evelyn, Bradford's voice came through the speakers, and she felt tears streaming down her face before he said another word. If you're watching this, I'm dead, and you're alive. That's exactly according to plan. She wanted to reach through the screen, to warn him, to stop what was about to happen. But the video had been recorded 3 years ago, and all she could do was watch. Everything that's about to happen, Bradford continued. The ambush, my death, your survival. I engineered all of it. I know that sounds insane, but hear me out. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression intense. I found the black site evidence. Knew it was too big to expose alone. They'd kill all of us and bury it deeper. So I made a deal with Pierce. Told him I'd stay quiet if he guaranteed one survivor from the mission. That survivor had to be you. Bradford's eyes were sad but determined. You're the most capable operator I've ever trained, Evelyn. The only one I trusted to finish this fight if I couldn't. So I fed Pierce false intel, made it look like I was about to go public, forced his hand into setting up the ambush. The camera angle shifted, showing all 6 members of Ghost Unit 7 sitting in a circle in the tent. I told the team what I was planning, told them we were walking into a trap, asked who would volunteer to die so one of us could live and expose the truth. Bradford's voice broke slightly. All 5 raised their hands. Santos, Brennan, Donovan, Sullivan, Harding, every single one of them chose you to be the survivor. They knew, they understood, they stayed anyway. The camera panned across their faces, each man nodding at the lens. Santos with his crooked grin, Brennan serious and focused, Donovan calm and accepting, Sullivan checking his rifle one more time, Harding cracking his knuckles, ready for whatever came. We didn't die because we failed, Bradford said, the camera back on his face. We died to make you the weapon that would destroy them. You were always the plan, Evelyn, the bullet we fired at the heart of corruption. He leaned back, his expression softening. Don't carry guilt, carry purpose. You were chosen by 6 of the best operators in the world. We bet everything on you because we knew you'd finish the mission. Bradford's hand came up in a salute. Hunt them down. Make our sacrifice mean everything. And when it's done, train others. Pass it on. Make sure Ghost Unit 7 lives forever, even if we don't. His eyes locked onto the camera with an intensity that made it feel like he was looking directly at her. Keep learning from us, Master Chief. Keep fighting for what we believed in. Keep being the warrior we knew you could become. He smiled, and it was the smile she remembered from 1,000 training sessions and mission briefings. Semper Fi, Evelyn. We'll see you on the other side. Bradford out. The screen went black. Evelyn sat in the darkness of her quarters, tears streaming down her face. But for the first time in 3 years, they weren't tears of guilt or grief. They were tears of understanding, of purpose, of peace. They hadn't died for her, they had died through her. She was the weapon they had forged, the legacy they had created, the future they had believed in enough to give everything. The next morning, Evelyn stood in front of her class with renewed purpose. The weight she'd been carrying hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something she could use, something that made her stronger instead of breaking her. Today we're going to talk about sacrifice, she said. Not the kind of sacrifice that comes from bad luck or poor planning, but the kind that comes from choice, from believing in something bigger than yourself. She told them about Bradford's video, about 6 warriors who understood that some missions demand everything and gave it willingly so truth could survive. About operators who had understood that sometimes the mission required everything and they had given it willingly. That's the standard we hold ourselves to, she said. Not because we want to die, but because we're willing to, if that's what the mission requires. If that's what protecting our country and our values demands. The candidates sat in silence, the weight of that commitment settling on their shoulders. You don't have to be Ghost Unit 7, Evelyn continued. You just have to be worthy of what they died for. Honor, duty, service, truth, justice. The things that make this country worth protecting. Colton raised his hand, and Evelyn nodded at him. Master Chief, how do we know if we're worthy? Evelyn considered the question, then answered with the wisdom Bradford had given her years ago. You're never completely worthy. You just keep trying to be better today than you were yesterday. You keep learning from the dead, and you keep teaching the living. That's all any of us can do. 6 months after that, Evelyn was making a routine visit to Fort Bragg to check on the first graduating class of the Ghost Legacy program. She walked through the mess hall, now just another officer rather than the invisible janitor. But old habits died hard, and she noticed things that others missed. Like the young woman in the corner, wearing a janitor's uniform that was 3 sizes too big. Moving with careful, measured precision, watching everything with eyes that had seen too much. Evelyn observed her for a moment, seeing herself from 3 years ago. The same posture, the same controlled movements, the same haunted look that came from carrying ghosts. As Evelyn watched, a group of cocky Special Forces soldiers entered the mess hall. Young, arrogant, full of themselves. They saw the janitor and decided she was an easy target for their entertainment. Hey, sweetheart, you lost? Kitchen's that way. The young woman said nothing, kept mopping, tried to stay invisible. One of the soldiers kicked her bucket, sending water cascading across the floor she just cleaned. The janitor stopped, slowly straightened, and Evelyn saw the shift in her posture, the operator's stance that no amount of hiding could completely disguise. Before the situation could escalate, Evelyn stepped forward. Gentlemen, I'd step back if I were you. The lead soldier turned, saw her rank insignia, came to attention. Ma'am, you were just harassing a federal employee. Evelyn pulled out her DIA credentials. You were also about to make the same mistake some Rangers made a year ago. Trust me when I say you don't want to finish that thought. The soldiers paled and backed off quickly, muttering apologies as they left. Evelyn approached the young janitor, who watched her with wary eyes. What's your name? Stella. Stella Hartwell, ma'am. Former service? Marine Scout Sniper. Dishonorably discharged 6 months ago. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. Dishonorably? For what? Stella's voice was bitter. Refusing an illegal order. My commanding officer wanted me to take a shot on an unarmed civilian. Intelligence said he was Taliban, but I had eyes on target. It was a kid, maybe 14 years old, carrying firewood. She met Evelyn's eyes directly. I refused the shot. CO said I disobeyed orders in combat. They court-martialed me, destroyed my career, made sure I'd never serve again. Evelyn studied her carefully, saw the same fire she'd once carried, the same belief that some things were more important than career or safety or following orders blindly. How would you like a chance to serve again? Real missions, real honor, real purpose. Stella's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Doing what? What you do best, except this time for people who deserve it. For a program that values operators who make the right choice even when it costs them everything. Evelyn handed her a card with nothing but a phone number and the Ghost Unit insignia. Ghost Legacy Program. We're recruiting, but I need to be clear about something. We operate in shadows. No recognition. Your dishonorable discharge stays on your official record. You stay dead to the regular military. She paused, making sure Stella understood. Can you live with that? Stella looked at the card, then at Evelyn, saw something in the older woman's eyes that spoke of understanding, of having walked the same path, of knowing what it meant to be broken by the system and rebuilt by purpose. Ma'am, I've been dead for 6 months already. Might as well be a useful ghost. Evelyn smiled, a genuine expression of warmth that was rare but real. Report Monday at 0600. Ghost Legacy Facility, Building 447. Don't be late. As she walked away, Nate stepped out from where he'd been watching. New recruit? Sniper, court-martialed for refusing to shoot an unarmed kid, chose honor over career. Sounds familiar. They walked to the parking lot together, and Evelyn looked back at the mess hall one last time. Bradford would have loved her, she said quietly. Would have loved all of them, the new generation of ghosts, serving in silence. Nate nodded. What he started in Kandahar, we're making sure it never ends. That's the mission, Evelyn agreed. That's always been the mission. They drove off Fort Bragg as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind them, the base continued its eternal rhythms. Soldiers training, operators preparing, ghosts serving in silence. Evelyn's voice carried through the car, soft but certain. 6 operators died in Kandahar, but what they stood for never died. Honor, sacrifice, service in silence, truth over convenience, justice over expediency. She touched the challenge coin she kept in her pocket, feeling its familiar weight. It passes from the dead to the living, forever. That's what Bradford taught me. That's what I'll teach them. That's what they'll teach whoever comes after. The car disappeared into the North Carolina evening, carrying ghosts who had learned that death wasn't the end, that purpose could transcend mortality, that 6 men who had died believing in something bigger than themselves had created a legacy that would outlive them all. In a small room in the Pentagon, challenge coins gleamed on black granite. 7 names etched in silver. 7 stars marking sacrifice that could never be fully repaid, only honored. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, new ghosts were learning old lessons. The dead teaching the living, the cycle continuing. Mortui vivos docent, forever.